Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever pulled off the near impossible task of a successful follow-up to the 2018 Black Panther film and thrilling MCU installment, despite tragically losing Chadwick Boseman right before production of the sequel was set to begin, after a draft of a previous version of Black Panther 2 was written in 2020. And as someone who's written a few screenplays myself and read hundreds more, I am completely blown away by what Ryan Coogler and co-writer Joe Robert Cole were able to accomplish, and the way they were able to relatively quickly reconceive this narrative as one focused instead on Shuri, evolving the character into an instrument of grief that taught audiences both how to mourn Chadwick Boseman and T'Challa, and how to process the death of any loved one in our lives. This is especially impressive now that these creatives are opening up about what that original 2020 script draft looked like. This week, an in-depth interview with the co-writer Joe Robert Cole, and cryptic mentions that you might have missed in other articles upon this movie's release about other characters who were originally going to be killed off instead of Ramonda, and when exactly elements like Namor, Talokan, and even T'Challa's son Toussaint came into the story. So for the sake of celebrating the challenges and triumphs of the filmmaking and screenwriting processes, let's break down everything we know about this original script of Black Panther 2. What would Wakanda Forever have looked like with T'Challa in it? Well, according to director Ryan Coogler, this second Black Panther film was always going to be one about Wakanda's relationship with Namor's rival kingdom. In a podcast interview that Ryan Coogler did with Ta-Nehisi Coates, Coogler said that as early as late 2018, months after the first Black Panther was released and the movie was starting to get Oscar buzz, Coogler began to have meetings with Marvel Studios about what the sequel was going to be.
I knew I wanted to make another one. And, when I was doing my deep dive, all of his stories, there were like a few characters that he would interact with. I thought, man, this is just like, this would be awesome. And I knew that like it would be Claw and Killmonger for the first one, but Namor was like all over these books, and it was always really interesting. If we ran it back, it would be about him and Namor, and we would introduce Marvel's Atlantis to the fold.
The co-writer Joe Robert Cole confirmed to Rolling Stone that Namor was always going to be the antagonist of this movie, and that they had always wanted to bring in Marvel's Atlantis because, yeah, in the comics, T'Challa's biggest rival really is Namor. But since that DC's Aquaman was going to be coming out at the end of 2018, they really went in deeper. They changed Atlantis to Talokan, basing it all on Mesoamerican mythology. Coogler also said the movie was going to explore T'Challa more as a person.
Second script was like a T'Challa vehicle. It was like, okay, we set the world up. Now we're gonna do the deepest dive into this guy that you could imagine. And that was what excited me even more, because I knew Chad better as a performer and I knew him better as a guy.
Yeah, notice how Coogler said that there were certain biographical elements about Chadwick Boseman as a human being that he wanted to bring in to inspire the character of T'Challa. And specifically, at this period, the relationship between the two men, Chadwick Boseman was tragically planning a wedding with his partner Simone. Coogler also confirmed in this podcast that he finished his draft in August 2020 and brought it to Chadwick Boseman to read.
My last conversation with him was calling him, asking him if he wanted to read it before I got notes from the studio. That was the last time we spoke. He passed maybe a couple weeks after I finished. And then he was like, yeah, he said he didn't want to read it because he didn't want to get in the way with whatever notes the studio might have or what have you. So he was like, it's better for him to read it later. I found out later that he was too tired to read anything.
Yes, this is a very heavy but meaningful podcast with some really deep moments from Ryan Coogler. I highly recommend you listen to it. But from this, we know that Coogler's 2020 draft was a rivalry between T'Challa and Namor, the two kingdoms, exploring T'Challa as a family man and a political leader debating whether to join forces with Namor in the war against the surface world, essentially the conflict that Shuri and Ramonda face as rulers and representatives of the Kingdom of Wakanda. Interesting to also note that Coogler always intended on calling back Killmonger from the ancestral plane. Cole also confirmed that in the Rolling Stone interview, that Killmonger's ancestral plane return was always going to be in the works. The difference was that in the 2020 draft, this return was going to be a rematch with T'Challa. Perhaps not a physical rematch, but a war of words, similar to the powerful speech that Killmonger gives Shuri. But upon Wakanda Forever's release, there was another in-depth article from Variety that kind of got buried by the opening weekend headlines. But in that article, there was one mysterious paragraph that reveals quite a bit. It reads, as is often the case with Marvel Studios productions, the screenplay was a largely fluid document from pre-production all the way through the final cut of the film. An early subplot where the United States featured more prominently in the confrontation between Wakanda and Talokan was dialed down, while the incident that launches the third act shifted focus to different characters. So reading between those lines, two things there. Essentially a US invasion of Wakanda, and then a different incident that launches the third act, focusing on different characters. Now, of course, the US invasion of Wakanda is hinted at in the scene with Val and the Secretary of State, but we never actually see it. They don't get there yet. Maybe Marvel Studios is saving that for a future title, like Thunderbolts. Now, Black Panther Wakanda Forever offers an optimistic view of the future. Wakanda Wakanda will last forever. But sometimes the pressure of forever can be overwhelming, and it's helpful to just say what's going on right now. Well, Inkbox tattoos can help with that. Inkbox tattoos last 1 to 2 weeks, so you can express yourself with a tattoo for the mood you are in right now without worrying about whether or not you'll want it, well, forever. There are over 10,000 tattoo designs to choose from. You can even create your own totally unique tattoo easily using Inkbox's custom platform. And if you're a pro artist or an avid doodler, you can draw your own tattoo with one of Inkbox's freehand tattoo markers. Now, I chose the Boo Boo Ghost tattoo. I really like ghosts. I like this design. I'm gonna put it right here on my wrist. Now, applying the tattoo is really easy. You just take this primer wipe, you rub the area to clean it. Right, nice and primed. You peel it, you place it, and you stick it. All right, it's stuck. And this tattoo is gonna develop over the next 24 hours to a dark blue or a black color depending on your skin. Let's give it a day and see what happens. And I am back, and check it out. It's already starting to come in. See, unlike other temporary tattoos, Inkbox's ink sinks into the top layer of your skin, and after a week or two, ink fades as your skin naturally regenerates. The ink is plant-based, cruelty-free, and water-resistant. And here we are, I'm ghosted, and the good kind of ghosted. Inkbox tattoos are perfect for switching up your style, testing out your next tattoo idea, and make for unique gifts for the upcoming holiday. So right now, you can use code NEWROCKSTARS to get 25% off your entire Inkbox order. There's no minimum order requirement, but you can only use it once, so stock up. The code will only be good until the end of 2022. To get started with Inkbox, just click the link in the description and start browsing. But that Act 3 incident structurally refers to the death of Queen Ramonda and Shuri seeing Killmonger in the ancestral plane. In the final version of the movie, that is the sequence that ends the second act. When Shuri reaches her lowest point, the sequence that ends with Shuri powering up as a new Black Panther and confronting Namor in the Talokanil in the final battle, the third act. So this Variety quote is glossing over the fact that in a previous draft, either a different character was going to be killed off instead of Ramonda, and or Shuri was going to see a different character in the ancestral plane than Killmonger. Now, to be clear, Cole confirmed that it was never considered to use CGI to recreate the likeness of Chadwick Boseman, but it is possible that a past version of Wakanda Forever featured, instead of Ramonda dying, the death of a character like Okoye or M'Baku. If you think about it, in a version of this movie where T'Challa was the hero, M'Baku's death would have been a pretty devastating loss. Namor would have killed T'Challa's strongest ally, T'Challa's Mercutio, something that feels like it could have still survived to the later version of this movie, considering M'Baku's brotherly status to Shuri and how relatively little he now has to do in the final battle of this movie. Like, they kind of had to come up with stuff for him to do in the final fight. Now, yes, they did bring back M'Baku to Warrior Falls to claim the throne, but when it comes to that final battle, as fun as it is to watch him fight, you can't really say he's much of a game changer in the tide of that war. Now, Cole does admit that they definitely played around with the idea of making M'Baku the Black Panther of this movie altogether, but pretty early on, they settled on Shuri being the most impactful focal character of this kind of story, and then after they made that decision, they shifted all other characters into Shuri's orbit. Really, the most surprising thing to learn about the original 2020 script draft was, according to Cole, T'Challa having a son was always going to be part of this movie. He said that T'Challa had a child in the script prior to Chad's passing and was always in the DNA of what they wanted to do. Cole even said that this 2020 draft was more, quote, child-focused, and then that element was more reduced after Boseman's death. Cole said they went back and forth on when to introduce Toussaint, originally planning to straight up name the kid the first time we see him when Ramonda visits Haiti, but later they decided to just show the kid in that scene and then introduce him by his name in the final scene. So what does more child-focused mean? Well, Ryan Coogler might have given us the answer in another interview he did with Inverse in early November, where he revealed about the earlier draft, quote, the tone was going to be similar. The character was going to be grieving the loss of time, coming back after being gone for 5 years. As a man with so much responsibility to so many, coming back after a forced 5 years absence, that's what the film was tackling. He was grieving time he couldn't get back. Grief was a big part of it. The loss of time, a forced 5-year absence. Yeah, it really does sound like this was going to be about T'Challa having missed out on the early years of his son's life. Kia was obviously pregnant with T'Challa Jr. before the snap and gave birth to him shortly after. T'Challa, having been dusted for that time, meant that he was gone for like the first 5 years of his son's life. And Coogler wanted to explore the theme of fathers being taken away from their sons and then suddenly coming back in those kids' lives and struggling to be respected paternal figures. If you look back at Ryan Coogler's work, this is a very important theme to him as a filmmaker. And by the way, Marvel Studios did totally repackage this relationship with Scott Lang and Cassie Lang and Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania Romania, with Scott's lost 5 years with Cassie being the one valuable piece of leverage that Kang used to incentivize Scott into helping him. But one can only imagine the deeper layers of impact that would have been had we seen it with T'Challa and his son. So here's a quick summary of what the original Black Panther 2 2020 script draft most likely was. 1. T'Challa returns from the blip and deals with having been an absent father to his son. 2. The United States actually invades Wakanda. 3. Namor confronts T'Challa and challenges him into joining the fight against the other nations of Earth, leading to a fight between the two kingdoms, Wakanda versus Talokan. 4. Killmonger returns in the ancestral plane, but tests T'Challa, maybe even tries to convert T'Challa's son to his ideology. And 5. A different character dies in Ramonda, maybe M'Baku. Now again, the point of all this sleuthing isn't to say the previous version would have been better, but really to appreciate how story elements shift and evolve over time, and to respect the creative team for finding a new way into the story while redeploying these elements in service of a more impactful theme about loss. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at EA Voss. Follow New Rockstars, subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.